So let's go ahead and get started. So Juju is here today. Can you say hi?
Hello, everybody. I'm Juju. Hi, in case, I don't know, you forgot.
Okay, so Juju, do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Sure. Should I read out this quote or?
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah.
So, what is prison abolition? There should be no jails. They do not accomplish what they pretend to accomplish. If you would wipe them out, there would be no more criminals than now. Clarence Darrow. So, I didn't really know about this topic really. I've heard about it in passing, but so what is prison abolition was kind of research for me as well. So prison abolitionists, so people who believe that prisons should be abolished, argue that it isn't enough to just reform the current prison system. I think mostly in the United States, but I guess this can be applied to any country. And it must be completely dismantled, and in its place, there should be rehabilitation. So society must invest in communities and address harm in other ways. So what this means is that reduce or eliminate prisons and replace them with systems of rehabilitation that do not focus on punishment and government institutionalization. So basically just getting rid of prisons and investing in ways that can prevent crime before it even begins, among other things. But I guess that's one way, the rehabilitation. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. So basically, a short summary. The prison abolition movement wants to actually completely eliminate prisons. So instead of like fixing the prison system, they don't want prisons at all. And what they want to do is to work on solving problems that lead to crime, that cause people to commit crimes. Also, if you have questions, feel free to send them in the chat. Questions about words can be like if you don't know a word, interrupt us immediately. Okay, so let's keep going. So for your homework, your little viewing, I sent you guys this video and we're gonna watch it together so we can talk about it. So I'm gonna put it in like 0.75 speed. It's a very short video, so, and with captions. Awesome.
Good morning, John. It's Friday. A few weeks ago, a company called Visually emailed me and was like, hey, Hank, if you could do a high-quality animated shoes. Now, that was a hard choice, but I went with incarceration in America because it is messed up. Now, crime is also messed up. Bad things happen to good people, and that's terrible, and something should be done about it. But we send people to prison to be punished, and to prevent them from doing bad things again, and to deter others from breaking the law. Punishment, corrections, and deterrence. Now, we have this habit of thinking of prisoners as something very external to society. After all, there are literal walls between them and society, walls capped with razor wire and watched over by people with guns. But millions of prisoners are released each year. Today's prisoners are tomorrow's neighbors, so corrections should probably be the most important piece of the incarceration pie. Unfortunately, it is not. We are, however, really good at punishment. America has about 4% of the world's people and about 25% of the world's incarcerated people. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. Over the last 30 years, that number has skyrocketed, increasing over 400%. 41% of American juveniles and young adults have been arrested by the time they turn 23. Children as young as 13 years old have been sentenced to die in prison. And our prisons violate international standards. Solitary confinement increases instability and violence in inmates and is considered by international law to be torture. But in America, it's not regulated by anyone except the prison officials. No judge, no jury. Arguably the most devastating form of punishment we enact in this country, and yet there is no appeals process. And you think it's hard to get a job in America? Well, we make it intentionally more difficult to get a job once you have a conviction on your record, not to mention just to live your life. Convicts are ineligible for welfare, student loans, public housing, food stamps, and are often socially disconnected from community and family support structures. So in addition to having high recidivism rates, they have very high rates of homelessness and suicide. Somewhere along the way, we started to think that being tough on crime meant being tough on criminals, but that's not the same thing. Punishment is only one piece of a much larger crime reduction pie, and it's an expensive one, with some institutions paying more than $100,000 per year per prisoner. Long prison sentences have helped to decrease crime, but no more than 25% of the decrease we've seen can be attributed to incarceration, and it costs far beyond just dollars. The cost is to people, to our country, to communities, to families, and to ourselves. The policy seems to be if you committed a felony, we just give up on you. These wars on crime, wars on drugs, they are wars on people. The smart political move is to appear tough on crime because crime is scary. So we increased minimum sentences, we arrested more people, we sent more of them to prison. That's how we looked tough on crime. But the results are in. It's bad policy. It's cruel, it's short-sighted, and to continue this policy of mass incarceration would be foolish. We're living inside of a massive $75 billion per year failed experiment. 2010 was the first year in nearly 40 years that the number of incarcerated individuals in America did not increase. Policymakers are beginning to realize the magnitude of this failure, but there is a long way to go. John, I'll see you on Tuesday.
Okay, so this is a very, very good video. It talks about a lot in a very small amount of time. So he talks about a lot of things, but based on what he said, does anybody want to give some reasons why people want to abolish prisons?
You can talk. I think it's because prison doesn't work. It's for me, it's like a cycle. People go to prison, but when they leave prison, they probably got worse, and they go to prison again. So it doesn't work, and this person stay like isolate of the world and of family. And I think like people need people to recover. We need support. These people need support. So for me, doesn't work.
Yeah. Laura, were you going to say something?
I was going to say just that I think that people, when you go to jail, when you lose contact with your family and your loved ones, you just got very, very worse because you need them to get better and everything. And one thing that I loved about the other video is that the woman said hurt people hurt people. So I think that when you go to jail and you get hurt and you are there, you don't have contact with anyone, and you get out, you're just so hurt, and it's you are gonna hurt someone because of it. And I think that this is one of the reasons that why the jails did not work.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, so what you said is very important. Hurt people hurt people. So, and also Isabella, what you said. So in one moment in the video, they're talking about solitary confinement. So solitary confinement is when you're alone in the cell and you don't talk to anyone. So you don't see the light of day, you can't interact with anyone in prison. And that is called, like, international law says it's torture. But nobody in the United States is actually taking care of that, making sure it doesn't happen. And it does happen. So that's one reason why a lot of people see prison as the ultimate form of torture. Anybody else has an idea about why people should abolish prison? Um think about race, especially, and like the amount of people who go to prison. Like, how can I put it? Is it is the judicial process fair? Is it fair for people of marginalized communities, such as Black people, Hispanic people? Is it fair? Yeah. So yeah, what Eduardo says also makes sense. But think about the amounts of people, like, how can I put it? The ratio, that's the word. The ratio of people in prison tends to be very heavy on African Americans, Hispanics, people from very rough backgrounds that didn't have access to education. They they didn't have any support from the government, and they are put in prison in very disproportionate rates. So that's also a reason why people want to abolish prisons, because the judicial process is very unfair. So the judicial process is basically the judge, right? So the person who's going to say if you're going to prison or not. Another part of it is, um, yeah, also Bruna, thank you for that. So Eduardo and Bruno both have really good points. Just take them and throw them in a box with worse people, and that forgets they're still human, exactly. And also Bruna, and how it would be for foster kids, because a lot of these people start doing crime because there is no support to foster kids after they are older. So if I understand it right, it's like a lot of these, so foster kids end up also committing crime because they don't have support when they're older. Is that right, Bruna? If you can turn on your microphone. If you
Uh, yeah, it would be like when they get older, they don't have like the classes or teachers as we have, and they don't learn like I need to go to a university to do this and this. They think as I have this friend, he sells drugs, so I should do it too. I would earn some money and I could get high, you know.
Yeah, that's really good. Also, for people who don't know, a foster kid is a kid who, sometimes an orphan, or maybe a kid whose parents don't have the conditions to take care of them. So they move so they live with another family, and sometimes they move around a lot. Sometimes they go from family to family, and that's a very difficult childhood to live. You don't know stability. You don't know creating roots and friendships that could possibly help you get out of this bad place and turn to, like, education. Anyways, the third phenomenon is called the prison industrial complex. The prison industrial complex is basically prisoners working for, like, big companies just to make money. And oftentimes, well, they're forced to work because they're in the situation. They have to do everything or they can say, I'll put you in solitary confinement. I'll extend your jail time. And they end up being part of this massive, massive business. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so why not just reform prison? Does anybody think maybe reforming would be a better initiative? Can anybody argue for reformation? So reformation is, instead of like completely destroying prisons, it's to try to fix prison.
So, in my opinion, they can change the prison. No, I'm not saying that. For me, if you do wrong, you need to pay, but not like this. They
Mhm.
can do like a school, like you go into prison and you'll be here for 2 years doing what? Not you will study. You will study something, learn something in the prison that when you go out, you say, "Oh, I will not go do any crime no more. I will study to get better."
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah.
opinion.
That's good. Yeah, so that's a very important point for reformation. So one thing that is a concern about from people who don't follow the abolitionist movement is that there are certain people that you just can't correct. Um, so here there's a very good quote. We might be able to radically reduce our prison population, but there are sadly some individuals who'll still be arrested, not arrested, but in prison, incarcerated for what they have done and what they may do to others. So you can not arrest a lot of people, but there are some people who are still dangerous to society. How about the revolution part? Why do people why would revolution instead of reformation be interesting? And especially look at this quote for help. So based on what we talked about, who has an idea?
Mari, I did not understand what would be a revolution on this
Mm.
prison system.
Okay, so the revolution would be to completely remove prisons. That's like the abolition, okay? So that's the revolution in this case. So it's a little bit of what we talked about, and also here, too, this quote. What is the quote saying, basically?
I think I actually don't think the revolution would be the best choice. I think the judgment system is totally failing with judging people because I think the society it's still so racist. So people who commit the same crime, and if you're black or something like that, you have a better chance to go to jail, and that's wrong. That's totally wrong. We understand that, but apparently the system does not. So that's why I think a reformation, not just in the prisons, but in the system of judging the people would be great, but not like a revolution because I think that like you, there's people that it's dangerous for society and
Mhm.
cannot live with us. But I think that those people should have like a psychologist, assistant, and like I don't know who said, but like education at jail and something to occupy their times to not just be like doing nothing or something like that.
Yeah. So, does anybody understand this quote? So, I understand what you say, and I think it's super valid about the revolution versus reformation. But does anybody understand kind of the perspective of the people who want a revolution? In this case, abolishing prisons. And it has to do with what you said about the racist prison system. So, does anybody think they can explain this quote and how it has to do with revolution?
I don't know if I understand it, but I'll try to. I think that it says that they don't want to change, but change in the on the white supremacy system still. They want to change for better, and like the change that doesn't require for white people to be the bosses and the way it works today. They want to change it, but they want to change it in a way that it doesn't happen as now happens. I think. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's right.
So this quote is basically saying, so we have no interest in reforming a white supremacist system. So in the view of people of abolitionists, we can't do anything for prisons because they're so like so deeply rooted. They're so based on like white supremacist views on arresting people of color, people of marginalized communities, especially Black people. So we can't do anything for it. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so basically this part is more of a background part that I'm going to be explaining. So there are 4 steps for prison abolition, and those parts are the moratorium. Basically, that means stop building prisons. Actually, like the official statement is stop building cages. So a cage is like where you put animals a lot, like when you put a bird in a cage. So stop building prisons. The decarceration is this part where you take out people, you like basically remove people from prison. For example, in places where certain drugs were allowed, like marijuana, if marijuana was, I don't know, made legal in California, for example, and there are people in jail for having marijuana, take out those people, like just make those people free, take them out of jail. And the excarceration part is to decriminalize certain activities, for example, sex work, like prostitution, as long as they're over 18 or over 21. So make that legal, and like drugs especially, and also change our view about crime in general. And that also has to do a lot with defunding the police, which goes into diverting funds. So if you defund the police right now are seen as this massive corporation to oppress people of color because they do target people of color in an unproportional way. So the police are oppressive. The police are brutal. If you probably heard the term police brutality, right? Brutalidade da polícia. So the idea is to take out funds from the police because they're not being effective and invest those funds in solving the issues that cause criminality, that cause crime in the first place. So education, sources like resources for homeless people, take them out of homelessness. Psychiatric, so to divert those funds to oh my god, I can't say it, psychiatric hospitals, and so forth. So yes, that's basically the 4 steps of the abolitionist movement. Okay, so do you think this would work? Does anybody have like opposition, or does anybody agree with any of these 4 parts?
I was reading an article today about it to get more involved, and it is said about going to psychiatric. That the word you couldn't say, the same word
Yeah,
you couldn't say.
psychiatric. Yeah.
Yeah, to do those and people go to them. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't know why, but I just thought about Arkham Asylum, the Gotham City one,
Yeah.
that they are like they have psychologists with them, but it is like radical. And in a way, I think it would be the same way because they would have to imprison those persons, and they would be like, "Oh, I don't want to be here. I don't want a psychologist treating me." They wouldn't do voluntarily. So, and when I think of what would happen, it would be like an Arkham Asylum where it would be a bunch of crazy people trying to get out of it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe inmates would not collaborate with attempted treatment. Um, Anybody else? So anybody else has a concern with stop building prisons? Should we just stop building prisons?
For me, we cannot stop building prisons because in the earth have 7 billion people, and
Mm-hmm.
how all of them will be good? Will I'll, if we stop building prison, the bad people, where will they will go? I if in my opinion, they can uh, get them a little bit of the money when they use in the prison and using the education and
Yeah.
to help people because a lot of um, people that is on the prison, a lot of them don't have money and go to the criminal side. So I don't have money. I can't study. I will be a criminal, and that's a lot happens with a lot of people. Uh, in Brazil, we have the favela. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's hard for me study. I don't have a lot of money to study. Have bugs, everything." So they go. They don't know like here we are studying a lot of things in English from high school, a lot of things, but them don't know about it. So they say they think that the easier way to get a better life is crime and they become a criminal. But if invest in education, a lot of them will know a lot of opportunities, and they will say, "Oh, well, I will be a criminal if I can study and do a lot of things."
Yeah.
So, in my point, they cannot stop making prison, but they can get um a like they say that they use 80 billion 18 billion dollars each year. If they use 20 billion dollars on education, a lot of people that's under prison will not go more. They say, "Oh, why I will sell drugs? Why I will use drugs if I can study and be a good people? Why?" So
Yeah.
for me, they cannot stop, and if they them invest in education, will be better.
Yeah. So what if, but basically you're saying that you're arguing for the fourth step. You're saying we should divert funds towards education. We should give this money to education. So basically,
Yes, it is.
you're arguing, well, obviously this is all a process. You wouldn't like all of a sudden stop. Actually, maybe, but like it's a process, right? You take some funds, invest in education, then start decriminalizing stuff. And then when you start decriminalizing things, a lot of people are not going to go to jail anymore. And when you start giving funds, a lot of people will also be more interested in having an education. Actually, a lot of people are still interested in having education. They just can't. They're hungry. They need to eat. So, yeah. Okay.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that the first step makes sense because if you go through all the steps, it makes sense because if you divert funds and make education better and give financial conditions to the people who have not these conditions, they wouldn't go to jail. So we already have a lot of jails. We don't need more of them if we make the number of people that go to jail decrease it, I guess.
Yeah, lower. Yeah, lower.
For example, the Netherlands are closing their jails because they are trying to solve the problem and not to just put the people in the cages.
Exactly. The Netherlands, Norway, Finland, all those countries who are partially socialist, have a lot of socialist policies, not saying anything, but they end up closing their prisons. Okay, let's move on a little. Anybody else has thoughts on this? Because we're going to talk a little bit about the ideas surrounding this. But if you have any other thoughts, awesome. Also, we have probably a minute. So once I go dark, once it crashes, you guys can just rejoin. Então, temos tipo mais ou menos minuto. Então, quando acabar, tipo, só clica no link de volta. Okay. Okay, so restorative versus punitive justice. So restorative justice is the idea that a lot of you talked about. So making the prisoners understand what they did wrong, giving them access to nice, to talking to people, being able to talk to people, being able to have hobbies and so forth. I have this great example here. Can you guys still see my screen? Can you see this?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
So in this example, this prison is